Hi, my name is Dr. Cheek and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. Thank you for joining me again today. Today we're going to be talking about something a little different than what I was talking about in the previous video. Today we're going to be talking about a recent headline and something I've been hearing chatter about as it relates to a psychologist stating that if you watch true crime shows, then you should ask yourself about your relationship to trauma. So I wanted you to take a minute to listen to this quick short video. I think it's about 15 to 60 seconds, and just to hear what she's saying.
The treat. I am treating myself by giving myself something that's killing me. So to have to flip it. And of course, in moderation, because when people hear that, they're like, do you mean I can never have, right? So and drinking water instead of all the soda. Sleep is a big one. It is hard to come home to yourself when you're exhausted. You know, we are busy, and then all night people are on their phones or, up and can't sleep. And I say, if your idea, and hopefully this is okay to say.
You can say whatever you want.
Yes. If your idea of relaxing before you go to sleep is watching 3 episodes of Law and Order, I would encourage you to think about, why is trauma relaxing to me?
Oh.
That's what it is. I mean, it's harm, crime, violation, attacks, and that's what is going to soothe me into my bedtime.
So, all right, what you've just been watching, it was a podcast, and the podcaster name kind of escapes me, but I think her name was Mel Robbins. And she was speaking to Dr. Bryant. Dr. Bryant is a clinical psychologist, and she's also the president of the American Psychological Association. From her bio, she has a history of research in the area of trauma, and her recent book, which is what a lot of the podcast was talking about or reflecting on, was related to trauma and homecoming. So when I read these headlines, I wanted to take a moment to listen to the entire podcast so I could get a better understanding of the context with which Dr. Bryant was making this statement. And the podcast itself is only like an hour. And I think she starts to talk about this at about 33 minutes into the podcast. Now, a lot of the podcast was focused on her book, Homecoming. And what it focused on a lot, the idea that when we've experienced a trauma, and sometimes when we haven't experienced a trauma, but we've been around people that we trust and we care about that have told us who we are, we tend to feel somewhat disconnected or psychologically disconnected from who we genuinely are. So we sometimes have a hard time relating with ourselves because we don't feel connected to who we are, who we truly are. So she used a term called psychologically homeless. I believe that's the term she used in the book, and they discussed it during the podcast. So with psychologically homeless, the idea is that you feel detached from yourself. And at about 33 minutes in, she starts to discuss ways in which you can reconnect with who you are, what you value, and the things you hold true to who you are as a person. So she started talking about this as it relates to self-care, because self-care is a way of us reconnecting, is a way of us doing things that demonstrates that we care about ourselves, that we are putting time and effort into making sure we're doing things that benefit us to some extent. So she started this conversation by talking about how, first, with self-care, what do you put in your body? What do you eat? When you put something in your body, the food you take in, are you asking yourself, am I eating this because I love myself? So basically, are you taking time to take stock in the fact that if what you're eating has any nutritional value, or is just a bunch of empty calories? If not, then take some time to ask yourself, am I eating this because I love myself? Then she went on to discuss having a work-life balance to some extent, and then actually she went on to discuss sleep, getting adequate sleep, and when you come home from work, how do you relax and actually start what we consider sometimes a nighttime routine to help you start to wind down and to get ready for bed at night. And she made the statement that and let me go back for a moment. In reference to sleep, she was talking about sleep because sleep is necessary. Sometimes we tend to think that if we're able to get 4 hours of sleep, that should be adequate enough sleep for us to function. And 1 or 2 days, that may be an adequate amount of sleep in order for you to function. But over time, not getting adequate sleep, not being able to get to certain stages or certain levels of sleep can start to affect your ability to deal with like everyday stressors. Because at some point you may start to, may start to affect your mental capacity. It may limit your ability to like deal with everyday stressors. So you may find that small irritants start to cause a level of frustration that's just outside of who you are normally. So this is why she kind of focused on sleep and the importance of sleep. But with that being said, what she made note of is, if you think watching 3 episodes of Law and Order to go to sleep is a way that you relax to go to sleep, then you should ask yourself, why am I relaxed by trauma? And given her history on studying trauma, that's an understandable question, and that's an understandable thought process. The reason why this was interesting to me was because probably like a week or so later, I was listening to another podcast, which was a comedy podcast, typically the type of podcast that I listen to. They made reference, and they kind of go over current events sometimes. So they referenced this particular article stating that she noted, but they said it in terms of the psychologist said there was a study that noted that people who watch true crime videos are relaxed by trauma. First things first, she never said it was a study. And up until this point, I have not found a study that actually makes that assertion that if we do relax a true crime, or in this case, what she was actually referencing, which wasn't true crime, because true crime is actually nonfiction. But what she was actually referencing was crime shows, like crime dramas, like Law and Order, Criminal Minds, CSI, NYPD, all of those other shows that aren't true crime. They are actual fictional crime shows. And I know true crime, I watch a lot of ID channels. So those are the true crime shows, like when you are listening to and being witness to actual crimes, not fictionalized crimes, but actual crimes. And she never actually spoke to true crime at all. So one, I haven't found a study to this point that makes that assertion. And two, the one study that I have seen as it relates to true crime, actually noted that they found that more women than men read or watch true crime series, and they went further to study like the reasons why, and they found that most women watch true crime or read true crime as a way to understanding the psychological mind of a killer, or to get specifics on how to survive. That's the only one that's the most recent one that I've been able to find as it relates to watching true crime, or actually as it relates to watching true crime and having an understanding of why someone actually engages in watching crime shows or true crime shows or reading that type of material. I personally used to watch a lot of fictional crime shows. So I used to watch a lot of Law and Order, SVU. I used to watch a lot of Criminal Minds, and those were the primary 2 shows I watched as far as fictional. Today I watch a lot of true crime shows, which are the shows that come on like Investigation ID, or the ID channel. So I'll watch a lot of those shows. Now let me be real clear. I have never in my life that I can recall experienced a true trauma. Like, I've never been in fear of my life. I've never experienced intimate partner violence. I've never been in a position where I felt like I was going to be seriously harmed or being caused any type of physical, emotional, or mental anguish. I've never been sexually assaulted. And let me go back. So the podcaster, as well as Dr. Bryant, both noted that they both were sexual assault survivors. So their view of these shows will be a lot different than mine because their experiences in life are different than mine. We are the totality of the experiences that we've had in life. So the lens by which they view these shows will be different than the lens through which I view these shows, not having experienced trauma in my life. So with that being said, I used to watch these shows, and I used to watch these shows a lot because before I decided to become just a general clinical psychologist, I was thinking about becoming a forensic psychologist. So I first started watching fictional crime shows just to see how they would portray the mind of the killers or the perpetrators in those shows. But then I started watching the ID channel so I can actually get a firsthand account from the actual perpetrators of what they were thinking, how they were feeling, as well as having like other mental health professionals on these shows attempt to analyze, either because they are viewing it from the same lens that I am or from the same perspective that I would, having the same level of information that I have, or having more information than they're actually sharing on this show, but being able to analyze it based off their understanding of mental health and what these people are experiencing. So this is why I used to watch those shows a lot, and I also used to go to sleep to true crime. It wasn't that it was relaxing before bed, but because it turned into background noise that I needed to fall asleep. Now, true crime fiction, I rephrase, fictional crime shows are the ones I used to go to sleep to. Now, those fictional crime shows I used to go to sleep to, the reason why I would was because normally the background or the screen of those shows is typically dark. So it's not a lot of light coming into my room that will wake me up. At the same time, they never really have like this jazzy, catchy jingle that would wake me up either. So this is why I used to watch them at night to sleep to. Normally I didn't watch them before bed because I watched most of them by then, so I already knew how they would go and how they would end. And because I knew it was fictional, I knew whoever it was, one, it wasn't a true story, so it wasn't something to be afraid of because it wasn't a true story. It might have been based off a true story, but we know people add what they need to add to make it sensationalized for TV. So I eventually stopped allowing these shows to play in the background when I'm asleep, while I slept, because they started to infiltrate my dreams. So I started to have dreams about the shows themselves. I started to have it negatively impacted my sleep because I would have nightmares or bad dreams about what was being shown on those shows. So I had to stop watching them for those reasons. It wasn't because I was relaxing the trauma or somehow needed that level of input to be able to sleep. And so the tie that Dr. Bryant was making to trauma and relaxing the true crime makes logical sense. So in my time as a psychologist, and from what she was saying, she actually endorsed this as well, is that a lot of people who've experienced trauma have this need to like keep moving. There is this let's keep going, let's keep busy, we're just on the go all the time, and this idea that to be calm and to be relaxed is uncomfortable. It's boring. It's not what they're used to. They're used to being in survival mode. And in survival mode, you're constantly moving. You're trying to figure out the next step. What do I need to do now? What do I need to do to keep going? What do I need to do to make sure everything's okay? I'm constantly focused on what needs to happen next. And when you're calm and relaxed, you're not focused on what needs to happen next. You're not focused on what happened yesterday, not focused on what's going to happen tomorrow. You're focused on the here and now. And the idea that you being a trauma survivor, having this need to have that constant go, 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 and feeling like, and her assessment that these shows have that same level of chaos, that same level of the ante as far as survival is concerned, and this is why you would relax. So it kind of makes logical sense. But at the same time, what I feel like Dr. Bryant was doing in those moments was making an educational assumption, which is what we call a hypothesis or a theory. She was theorizing her thoughts as it relates to why someone would relax to trauma, or why someone would watch shows that are based off of attacks and different types of violence before going to bed. And logically, that that theory makes sense, but it's not, what she was saying was not actually, I don't think it was actually based off a study, or at least I haven't found the study that she was basing those thoughts off of. I do think she, because of her own research in trauma, this is where that theory came from, and understanding how people who've dealt with trauma deal with everyday life. I can see how she can come up with the hypotheses or the theory that she was making around someone wanting to use something that's some type of show that has the ability to have that same level of go, chaos, survival mode, violence, things that we don't find comfortable. Someone who would feel comfortable in that situation. So I understood what she was saying. Now, what my goal in this is so that you can understand, one, when a mental health professional is making a statement, 9 times out of 10, it's coming from a place of our understanding of human behavior, something that we studied, something that our true understanding of human behavior based off the research. Dr. Bryant is very good at her craft, and her craft is psychology, her craft is mental health, her research is in the area of trauma. So what she was saying is based off her educational understanding and her research in the area. What I implore you, or what I want to encourage you to do, is that when you hear a mental health provider say something, or a mental health professional say something, I want you to, one, if you feel like it applies to you, be willing to have that conversation with your individual mental health provider or medical provider. Because what I don't want to happen, or what I want us to try to keep from engaging in, is getting to a place where we start to pathologize every behavior that we're having, because some of these behaviors are just normal. You could be watching it simply because you like it. But now you're starting to question, like, did I experience a trauma in the past and I'm not aware of? This is why I like these shows. That's what I want. That's why I'm making this video, because I want to encourage people to be willing to not just pathologize what they're experiencing because one person made a statement that was a very educated statement that came from a place of her understanding of psychology, mental health, and trauma. But she was not speaking to you individually. We don't know your individual situation. So when someone's making a generic statement, that may or may not pertain to you. So I do want to encourage you to reach out to someone who knows you, who knows your symptoms, who knows your history, and discuss what your concerns are with them so you can have a better understanding of if this is something you should be concerned about. Always be willing to get some type of reassurance from someone who knows you better than an online personality or a mental health professional who has never met you. So as in any other video that I've done or I will continue to do, I hope that you've learned something from this video today. If you have any questions or you have things you would like to say, do not hesitate to add a comment or a question, and I'll get back to you if I can, or when I'm able to. Thank you for joining me today. Again, I hope you've learned something. I hope this is information that you can utilize, that is helpful to you. Look forward to speaking with you again. And I'm gonna go on a limb and say the next video will be based off of trauma, or the discussion around trauma. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day.